Well, the trip itself lasted more than twice as long as we expected, so it was arduous, it was difficult, and the conditions were trying. Nonetheless, we were held together by, first and foremost, our love of Palestine and our love of the people of Gaza, and second, by the bonds of loyalty that we developed with one another after we'd been on the boat for a period of time. And so that carried us through. And we were very aware, we remain very aware that whatever tribulations we were facing, drone attacks, logistical nightmares, storms, and so on, they're as nothing compared to the daily travails that Palestinians have forced upon them by an occupying genocidal state. So all of those things carried us through and propelled us forward. As for the interception, the imprisonment itself, well, it was kind of horrific. I mean, the interception itself was what they call a light interception, soft interception, so no violence with the actual taking of the boat. Nonetheless, it was illegal under international law for them to board our boat, for them to intercept us. We had every right, as long as the people of Gaza want us in their territorial waters, we had every single right in the world to go all the way to the coast and drop that aid off at the dock. But we were intercepted 70, in my case, 70 nautical miles out from the coast of Gaza. That's an offence to maritime law and it's an offence to international humanitarian law. And then, despite this soft interception, the treatment that we received when we got to occupied Palestine, or Israel as they call it, was also, I mean, it violated several tenets of the Geneva Convention, right? We were denied water for long periods of time. We were brought blindfolded and hands tied on a bus that was freezing cold in the middle of the night to a prison in the Negev desert where Palestinian prisoners have been tortured in the past and whatever else, and we were forced into tiny cells, 10 people to a cell, 12 people to a cell. We were denied essential medicines. People had their medicines thrown away in front of them. I saw people with heart conditions of all ages, including people right up into their 80s, have their medicine thrown away. We were denied water. We were denied water the whole time I was there, which was 2 days, in the desert, in these tiny corrugated iron cells that retain heat. We had to drink out of a feculent tap in the toilet, a tap that was producing brown water infected with fecal matter. That was our only source of water. We weren't given toilet paper for the first day. I had to really plead with them to give us one roll of toilet paper between 10 men. This is the kind of treatment that, as I say, violates the Geneva Convention, that falls far short of international humanitarian standards and law and so on. So it was just, I guess, really the kind of behaviour, the kind of treatment that you expect from a genocidal state. And by the way, let me just end by saying this. The treatment we received, we were a cameo in the theatre of Israeli cruelty. The Palestinians are the protagonist of that suffering and that cruelty. So after 2 days there, I felt like I'd been there for 2 years. I can only begin to imagine what it's like to be Palestinian and to be in that situation every single day of the year. Well, I saw feces smeared on the walls, which they hadn't bothered to remove. I saw lots of things written in Arabic, which unfortunately I can't read. But these were messages from previous prisoners, you know, messages from people who had been incarcerated or being held hostage illegally by occupying Israel. And yeah, I couldn't interpret what those messages said because I can't read Arabic. But yeah, that is true. That account is true. And we know, I mean, that prison is notorious. It's notorious for having produced many, many generations of tormented and traumatized Palestinians, children as well, who have been tortured there and raped as well. Yeah, I mean, interesting terrorists whose only weapons are baby formula, food, you know, rice, packets of rice and medicines. You know, no kind of terrorist that I've ever encountered. Obviously the only terrorists are the people who are committing genocide, who think that they have total impunity to bomb all their neighbours whenever it suits them politically, for domestic political reasons, and who have created more child amputees than at any other time in the past century anywhere in the world. 50% of children in Gaza want to kill themselves. You know, that's the outcome of terrorism, mass, state-scale, systemic terrorism. What we were doing was trying to bring baby formula and food and medicines, and we were kidnapped in international waters for wanting to do it. The people on board were lawyers, doctors, journalists, teachers, really decent, down-to-earth, salt-of-the-earth kinds of people. To have those people smeared as terrorists is just pathetic. It is laughable. And they ought to hang their heads in shame every day for the rest of their lives. But they won't, because nobody who has the capacity to do that would preside over such a disgusting genocide. You know, there are different, it sounds strange to say this, there are different levels of torture, right? There is very clear torture where you're seriously harming somebody's physical integrity and leaving them with lasting. And then there's things like putting people on their knees, chaining their hands together and forcing them to stay on their knees for 6 hours. That happened to all of us. That's torture as well. It's a lesser form of torture than cutting somebody open, but it's a form of torture. Denying people water when they're in the middle of the desert, that's a form of torture. Denying people their medicine when they have underlying heart conditions and could die. I'll give you an example. 2 nights ago, I've lost track of time, but 2 nights ago was my last night, thank God, my last night in that godforsaken place. And at about 10 in the evening, we just turned out the lights. And of course, it was like a row of cells with all the cells we could hear each other, basically. And at about 10 in the evening, somebody started shouting, help, medical emergency, there's a man in here and he's having, we think, a heart attack. He can't breathe, please, medical emergency. Nothing. We then came to the gates and started rattling the gates and shouting, to amplify their message. He's going to die. This guy you're going to let someone die in this cell. Help, get the doctor, there's a doctor on site. Nothing. And this went on for about an hour until eventually somebody said, we need to stop shouting and he's going to have to try and regain control of his breathing because clearly they're willing to let him die. And that's what he had to do. And he survived, I believe, or at least he did at the point when I left. I don't know what's happened. This is the kind of thing that they're doing to predominantly white Europeans. US passport holders, British passport holders, French passport holders, Spanish passport. You can only imagine what they feel comfortable doing to Palestinians. I mean, we went from being treated like subhuman species to being treated like demigods. It was really nice, and thank you to the Turks. It was really, I think it was a totally unexpected thing. When I was woken up at 5 a.m. by Israeli prison guards banging on the gates, calling us names, I couldn't have began to dream that that's how the day would end up. But I said earlier on to another Turkish broadcaster, the most important thing that the Turkish did was not feed us and give us nice beds for the night. That was really appreciated. But the most important thing they did was take us to doctors, take us to lawyers, and start gathering evidence of crimes against humanity.